As he continues to work, he accidentally steps onto something he describes as spongy on the ground. Suddenly, his leg is entangled with the body of a giant python. He has one last resort if he wants to survive this encounter, but will it be enough? Before I tell you how the story ends, let's take a trip to the coast of Cape Howe, Australia, where a diver fought off being partially swallowed by a great white shark. Eric Norris was diving for abalone shellfish with his friends and son. They were swimming in murky waters, so not much could be seen of their surroundings. Through the murky waters, a figure was slowly appearing but could not be made out. Before he could identify what or if he was looking at anything, his head was already in the jaws of a great white shark. This bite crushed his mask and broke his nose, and before he knew it, the shark took another bite, this time gripping his jaws around Eric's torso. Luckily, his weight vest took the brunt of the bite. Eric fought to free himself by stabbing his abalone chisel into the head and eye of the shark. The shark released his jaws from the diver and swam away, leaving Eric alive to tell the tale. He swam to the surface where his son and friends hauled him back onto a boat. He was then taken to a hospital and managed to make a full recovery. Woman versus mountain lion. An old married couple, Jim and his wife Nell, like to take hikes on California's many great trails. This time, they decided to hike on a trail near Fortuna, but this hike was different. Things were quiet, quieter than usual. One might say unsettling even. As they walk, Jim hears something, gravel crunching behind him. He turns around and immediately sees a mountain lion flying towards his face. He ducks and the cougar lands, adjusts itself, and readies for another pounce. This time, managing to bite down on the back of Jim's head. Nell was 20 feet in front when she heard Jim shriek. She then ran towards them while grabbing an 8-foot-long tree limb to hit his midside. No damage. She screamed at her husband to fight as he intensely resisted its attempts at his neck. In one moment, he's just digging in his pocket for a pin for her to stab it with. Luckily, Jim's head was a decent enough distraction for this plan to work. Nell reached for the pin in his pocket and jammed it into the cougar's eye, breaking it off inside. Yet the mountain lion's jaws remained tightly bound to Jim's head. In a final desperate frenzy to free her loving husband, she took a tree limb and smashed it over the cougar's head. This time it noticed Nell and took a few steps back, seemingly ready to pounce. Just as she realized this, she raised the limb above her head and screamed as loud as she could. At this point, the mountain lion decided that Jim's head just wasn't worth it and walked away. Secured in their victory, they soon began touring cities in an effort to educate hikers on outdoor safety. Really quick, I'm excited to say that I recently started a clothing brand. Here's my first product. I spent a lot of time on this, so if you like what you see, please check out the link in the description. Clothes are one of my many passions and it brings me great joy to see it finally brought to life. But I'm not here to get all sappy on y'all, so let's get back to the video. Man versus tiger. 51-year-old South African Sam Sangwani was headed to work on his bicycle when he passed something nobody wants to see on their way to work while riding a bicycle. A loose tiger catching shade under a tree. The man locked eyes with the tiger, and in that moment it got up and charged after him. Sam, who had managed to grab some rocks, began hurling them at the tiger. He used every last stone he had until there were no more stones left to throw. The tiger was unfazed by this bombardment and continued his pursuit. Sam, now running out of ideas, decides to fight the tiger off with his bike. He goes toe-to-toe with his foe for a whaggering 30 minutes. 30 minutes staring death in the face through the handlebars of his bicycle. Luckily, Sam was able to fight off the tiger long enough for someone to notice his plight. A woman sitting in her car saw Sam's 30-minute scuffle and called a local wildlife sanctuary for help. Sanctuary responders arrived at the scene and tranquilized the tiger. After that, it was brought back to the sanctuary it had apparently escaped from. To compensate Sam for keeping an eye on their tiger, the sanctuary gifted Sam a new bike. Man versus leopard. Carl Akeley was a naturalist who had just been appointed chief taxidermist at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. He was tasked with gathering new specimens for the museum's collection. He set off on an expedition that took him to the plains of Ogaden. There, he hunted specimens for days with no success. On one of the days, he was especially frustrated, and upon hearing rustling in the bushes, he fired his rifle towards the bush without knowing what he was shooting at. This will have turned out to be a costly mistake as the rustling stopped and a snarl began. He had fired his rifle at a leopard that at this point was now pursuing him. He tried to shoot again, but it was so late in the day that he couldn't see the sights on his rifle. He ended up missing the next two shots while the third stopped the leopard in its tracks. This shot was not fatal, and it continued its pursuit until it pounced on Akeley, missing his throat and biting his arm. There, the two scuffled until Akeley managed to slowly force his hand down the throat of the big cat. He was able to get on top and put the full weight of his body on it until it was incapacitated. Eventually, his team arrived and he borrowed a knife to make sure the job was done. Man versus elephant. It's New Year's Eve. Michael Fay is in Gabon helping set up one of the country's new national parks. While leading a tour group, Fay was charged by a young female elephant he claimed was defending her territory. He typically isn't afraid of elephants, so when they approach, he stands his ground. They usually buy his bluff and leave him alone, but this time, the elephant didn't stop. By the time it got within 3 feet of him, he turned and took 3 steps to run when he trips. He immediately turns around and the elephant is in the air ready to gouge him with her tusks. So he grabs onto them and moves his body out of the way when she hits the ground. Once she hits the ground, the elephant tries to crush the man with her weight. He feels his ribs breaking, but he persistently clings on. The elephant then tries shaking him loose, but he is clutched on for dear life. His body is being flung every which way until he loses his grip and goes flying 15 feet afar. He assumes his fate is sealed and anticipates the elephant will pierce him from behind at any moment. However, once he turns around, the elephant was completely gone. He survived facing off against this giant, but he was inflicted with many wounds. Once the adrenaline settled, he noticed the elephant pierced him more times than he could remember. Boy versus deer. When you're playing a game of two-hand backyard football with your boys, the last thing you want is an invalid player pulling tackles. Well, this fateful day, that very rule was smashed along with the body of a little boy. 2 young boys, Brandon and Wyatt, were playing a game of backyard football in Wintersville, Ohio. The ball happened to roll into the woods and Brandon, drawing the short stick by being younger, went to retrieve it. As soon as he reached out to pick the ball up, a deer, thinking the play was still going, rushed at him at full speed. The deer flipped him with its antlers and gave the boy many bruises and a gash. When Wyatt saw this encounter, he picked up a hefty stick and charged at the deer. He whacked the deer with the stick and gave it a taste of his own medicine. The deer, realizing Wyatt was playing too rough, chose to leave with a bruise of his own. Turns out there were actually 2 deer in the area at the time of the attack. They were gearing up to fight each other when the ball rolled over and Brandon got between them. Both of the boys are okay and Brandon was taken to the hospital for minor injuries. Man versus python. This final battle comes from a Kenyan man who had a terrible run-in with a giant python. Ben Nyumbe was working on a farm that had recently been experiencing livestock going missing. Perturbed but with little answers, Nyumbe goes back to work. As he continues to work, he accidentally steps onto something he describes as spongy on the ground. Suddenly, his leg is entangled with the body of a giant python. It didn't take long for it to eventually wrap itself around most of his body and pull him into a nearby tree. There, he continued to struggle until the python momentarily eased his grip and he was able to call for help on his phone. His employer and police arrived at the scene and were able to yank the two out of the tree with a rope. But the python would not let go. Realizing only he or the python will make it out of his death hold alive, he had one last resort. Nyumbe bit the tail of the giant python. This immediately loosened his grip and the officers and villagers were able to free him. The police then took the snake back to the sanctuary where it apparently had escaped. Nyumbe managed to walk away with only a minor injury of a cut lip where he bit the sharp tail of the giant snake. Anyway, that's all for this video. I hope you have a great day, stay cool, and peace out.